atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host and editor.
Hello, I am Rex.
And despite the fact that we've been talking for about 2 hours now, we are now officially starting episode 106 of this lovely show.
At last.
It took a while, but we had a pretty good conversation prior that unfortunately nobody will be able to hear, but I digress.
Yeah, went in some interesting directions given where it started.
Well, one thing that we didn't get into that I want to get into is, how have you been?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, I would say. Pretty good.
You've been pretty busy. We were supposed to talk like 3 days ago, but we've been unavailable to actually, our schedules haven't worked out per se, so... What have you been up to?
A lot of work, education, and then yesterday I ended up meeting up with a friend of mine, which was good fun. We got some drinks together and had a very unexpectedly long conversation that went from about 2 p.m. to about like 10 or 11 p.m. or something like that.
9-hour conversation?
Yeah, far longer than I anticipated. I was expecting to be back at like 6 or 7, maybe, if I was lucky.
So that's why we didn't talk yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear you're good. What have you been learning? Anything exciting in school you can talk about?
I mean, this week has mostly just been for me, just like working on the short film assessment. So doing like. For me, it's like been a lot of paperwork. We did a bit of practice filming like last week. I don't remember if I mentioned that last. I don't remember. We did some practice filming, and we've just been like fine tuning the script pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely have my worries, but I've had my worries since the beginning. But I will say I think the longer we've stayed with it, the slowly more and more confident I am at least getting in it, which is good.
You should slip me the script and let me read it. Maybe give me editing privileges. I'm
waiting for a new version of it at the moment.
Honestly, I would love to like actually look at it. You should be like, hey, I got a friend in the States. He works with companies. We should call him up and pitch him this. My first question would be, what does this mean? How does this speak to you as a human being? What does this say about the human condition? And if they can't answer that question, then we're going to go back to square one.
Yeah, no, that's been a lot of fun.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
You're going to show me your stuff when it's done, right? Like I'll be able to watch it.
Sure, I guess,
right?
Yeah. Sure.
I want to. I really want to. Genuinely.
Like, I'd imagine I should have access to the link when it gets uploaded. So, yeah.
You know, we gotta, as we both work on our own stuff, we gotta be working together to look at each other's stuff, you know how it be.
Yeah. But how about yourself? How are you doing? I'm sure you're quite busy.
I honestly, today, I like took a step back and realized, like, I'm starting to get into a phase of my life where I'm sending emails, like a lot of them. No, like since last week, I've been very busy. You know, I worked. We're going through a remodel at my job, so a lot of it's been like moving stuff around and trying to play catch up. You know, on top of doing day-to-day stuff, which we're losing people. People are changing schedules, requesting time off, going off, transferring. We're just it's been a struggle at work.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, but that's normal. So I mean, I did that literally almost every day except for 2 days this week. I actually went out and did some principal photography, some location scouting for my upcoming short film I'm working on for a company. I changed a couple of locations because I had ideas when I wrote my outline. I had a couple of images of locations, but since then I've went out here. I found a couple of places. I have a couple of ideas of what I want to film. I found out that walking around with a giant camera and being one of the only people know in town that is into filmmaking, you stick out like a sore thumb. So I went downtown and people ran up to me and were like, "Are you Elijah?" And I was like, "Oh no." And I knew who they were, but they were like, "I thought that was you between your hair and the camera." I was like, "Oh great." I'm known for two things: my hair and a camera. Just two things. But I did that.
Not the worst things to be known for.
Yeah, not the worst things. But I did that. That was a lot of fun. Outside of that, I did some graphic design work for Monsters with Attitude. I've done some video editing work for Kaiju United. I've been working on my Sharkdemic Blu-ray bonus features. A lot of scheduling going on, a lot of communication going on there right now. But I'm very excited for that. And there's a couple other things I can't talk about that I've been scheduling. So I've been very busy. Been very busy working a lot. It's looking like October is going to be a packed month for me because that'll be when I'm actually in the editing process for Sharkdemic, and I'll be getting another project confirmed in October. Not anything really cool, just a little editing thing I'm doing. And then I'm going to start hopefully on maybe production or some more pre-production stuff for my short film. And so a lot of it right now is just getting stuff done. I also have a couple interviews I need to edit for Kaiju United. So for me, it's been a lot of working, a lot of prep. I've been really busy.
On that note of Tokusatsu, have you seen any in this past week?
Homie, I literally just said I've been working this whole time.
Well, how am I supposed to know if you haven't watched any? If you don't say it specifically.
I will say this, I've been getting a lot in. I do have a lot that has come in that I'm excited to watch, but I have not watched any. I have been very busy. I got to finish up Zatoichi. I still have to watch Zatoichi Meets Yojimbo, and then I've got a plethora of other stuff I need to watch. In the conversation I had yesterday, I found out I now have someone to watch Zatoichi with. What does that mean?
I found out my friend is interested in Zatoichi. Duh.
Huh. Well, you still could have watched it with me.
That's true, Alberto.
You just didn't.
It is what it is.
It's an L on you. But hopefully this coming week I can actually sit down and watch a couple things. I don't remember if I talked about this last week, but I have a master list of tokusatsu that I want to buy, right?
Yeah.
And I actually recently found out that I'm under 80 titles away from completing the entire list, which is both amazing and scary at the same time. Because I've been buying off of this list for 4 years. So I'm almost done with this list period. And once that's done, I'm going to be out of stuff to buy unless new stuff comes out, and then I'll just be staying up to date. Which is not very good, because that means once I watch everything I own, what is there to watch?
Move on to Japanese cinema, man, as a whole.
I actually think I'm going to do Japanese horror. I think that's what I'm going to do next, is a more broader scope of Japanese horror.
Whatever your gateway drug is, I don't care. Just go all in, man.
Speaking of going all in, Rex, have you watched any tokusatsu this week?
Oh, No. the
So what?
the most I've really watched is I saw a movie that has Kyoko from Shin Godzilla and Tachibana from -1 in it, and that's it.
What movie?
It's called Missing. It came out earlier this year and just got added to Netflix. It's pretty good movie. I quite enjoyed it.
Gotcha. Now, I guess that means we're kind of done here. Before we transition into the actual film we're going to be discussing, I did want to bring up something because I feel like when we covered the film when it came out, it was a pretty good episode, and it's one of my personal favorite. And we got a couple of new things coming from it.
Is this perhaps referring to the upcoming Blu-ray release in Japan of Shin Kamen Rider?
It is. It very much is. So we do have the upcoming TV cut, which is they're turning the film into 5 episodes, correct, with new footage?
Yes.
Which I'm pretty excited for.
The new footage is mostly just like an outro for it, I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure it's mostly insert shots, nothing crazy.
I don't even think it's maybe like a couple, but like honestly, like they've already like even like prior to the film's release, they had for marketing, they had like the first 20 minutes of the film, like the Spider-Orc section, they had like a TV version of that where it was a 20-minute episode, and that was pretty much just almost the exact same as the movie. So it's like I'm sure these TV cuts are basically going to be pretty much the same. They only filmed for like a few days.
It would be interesting to watch it. I feel like some people would actually like it a bit more. I don't know if I would. I liked it as is, but maybe people would like it more.
Yeah.
But more so than that, because we already knew that was coming out. We've seen behind the scenes stuff. We've seen a couple things. We know they're including deleted scenes like the practical effect Kamen Rider clones fighting Kamen Rider 1 and 2.
The Shocker Rider fight. Yeah, that's finally the full scenes getting released outside of behind the scenes material.
So that's pretty exciting. But there's also
I hope they'll. Apparently, it's like 58 minutes of footage, so they'll probably include the other fight that was cut.
That would be exciting. They're also including a teaser or a trailer of some sorts.
Yeah.
Of a new Shin Kamen Rider Masked World, correct?
Yeah, Kamen no Sekai Masker World or World of Masks, which is named after the second half of the manga. So,
is that out of curiosity, do you think that'll be like just a promotional thing for the manga, or do you think we're going to get a TV show or a movie? Because they do kind of hint that at the end of the film.
Well, at the very least, my guess for what it is that it's like a proof of concept like trailer for Masker World, because if I don't know if you remember, but like back when the film came out during a press event for the film with the cast and director Ano mentioned the idea of doing a sequel, and it would have been called Kamen no Sekai Masker World or World of Masks.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, seemingly we're getting with this some form of that. Whether or not it's actually going to turn into a TV show, I don't know. The announcement is so vague that, like, Japanese Twitter still doesn't know what to make of it yet. And likewise, I don't know what to make of it.
Right.
But I'm very curious.
I do think it would be really funny if it ends up being like a second movie or even a TV show, because we know that Ano pitched Toho a Shin Godzilla continuation story, and Toho rejected it. And we know for a fact that Tsuburaya planned on doing a sequel to Shin Ultraman and a third film in the Shin Ultraman series, presumably Shin Ultraman continuation and Shin Ultra 7. And so I think it would be pretty interesting and kind of humorous if out of those three, Shin Godzilla won Best Picture. It did really well. Shin Ultraman is the highest grossing.
The box office gets the sequel.
Yeah, that'd be hilarious because according to what we know about Shin Ultraman Continuation or Blockbuster Ultraman movie, whatever, it's supposed to come out. Like, it was supposed to be released this year or next year, right?
Yeah, I think next year was the idea.
So we haven't had any announcements. I don't know when Subaraya Con is, but that would be probably when they do it next or announce it. But like we've had nothing on it. So the fact that like that's been silent, but here we have a possible Shin Kamen Rider sequel of sorts, whatever it may be, I think's really funny.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's also fitting because I personally think Shin Kamen Rider is the best of the Shin trilogy.
I mean, I think it's also just the one that's most... If one of them has to get a sequel, it should be Shin Kamen Rider.
I agree. Because Shin Godzilla ends fine. Like, it doesn't really have...
I think Shin Godzilla ends in a way where it's better not to have a sequel.
Yeah.
Shin Ultraman, I think either or. I think it works really well as a standalone, but you could work a sequel.
Yes.
Shin Kamen Rider, I think, it still works as a standalone, but it almost demands a sequel a little more than the other two.
Right. I would love to see that world be expanded upon.
Right.
Especially if Anno continues to be at the helm. Because I thought his creative vision shined beautifully.
It is a very Anno movie.
Mm-hmm. It's his best work. In my opinion, it's his best thing I've seen him do.
It's definitely one of his best, yeah.
So yeah, with that being said, I'm personally really excited for Shin Kamen Rider Masked World, whatever it may be. I'm not I'm not hyping for anything, but whatever it is, like I'm excited. If it turns out to be a manga promo, oh well. If it turns out to be a proof of concept trailer, well.
Because the manga is still going on. Because I saw the manga is like just in the movie now. Like it's now adapting the actual movie with like the Spider Orc stuff and Kamen Rider himself actually showing up now.
See, I would love for them to do a TV series that's like a prequel to Shin Kamen Rider. That would be kind of cool. More Shinya Tsukamoto. That's what the world needs, is more Shinya Tsukamoto.
More Midai Moriyama, too. He's a good actor. He's genuinely a really good actor.
Yeah, I would love to see that. But either way, I would love to see more Shin Kamen Rider.
Likewise. I love the cast.
So with that being said, with that out of the way, what if you were busy partying it up and I was busy working, what are we here for? I mean, it is October. It's October, second week in spooky season. Last week we covered 100 monsters. Are we doing Spook Warfare?
No.
Yeah, you're right. That would be stupid because that's two yokai films from that series back to back. That would be dumb.
Right. Who would ever do sequels?
Yeah, and we can't cover the Great Yokai War because we'd have to cover Spook Warfare first. So that doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, and there's another movie that comes out as between them as well.
That's true. Rex, what are we doing here?
Well, if we're throwing things on the dartboard, I did just so happen to today. I might have watched a little movie with not quite a yokai per se, but like a class of yokai.
A possible yokai?
Yeah, a bakemono, if you will.
Oh, bakemono.
Yeah.
Oh.
The film's name was Red Tears.
You mean Sword of Doom?
Or Monster Killer.
Or Red Tears Sword of Doom.
Yeah, that too.
You mean the film that was released April 7th of 2012, but had its premiere at the Tokyo International Film Festival in 2011?
That's the one.
Oh, it's funny you bring that up. because I also watched that film today, actually.
How convenient.
So yes, with that being said, we are covering Red Tears, the 2011 film. Technically, I guess it's 2011. It's one of those films where I feel like, because like if I were to say, hey, Tremors is a 1989 film, people would tell me I'm wrong. But it premiered then.
I would call it a 2012 film, but like
the copyright says 2011.
I mean, yeah, but the copyright's usually like a lot of times it's the year before, even if a film didn't even necessarily premiere the year before. A lot of the times,
I don't think so.
Depending on the movie, depends on the movie.
Most of the time, every time I see it, it's usually the date it gets shown first. Because on the Tremors
sometimes
set,
I've seen ones that have been even earlier.
That's weird. I know sometimes it's like way later, but that's more of like when the disc was made.
Yeah.
But yeah, so where do we even start with this movie?
Well, I think we should at least start with the fact that this movie, one of its main actors, as well as its producer, is Yasuaki Kurata.
Now,
are you familiar with him?
I know of him, but I'm not. I know he's a martial artist actor who's friends with Bruce Lee.
Yeah, was friends with Bruce Lee.
Was friends. I know he's been in a ton of Hong Kong kung fu films. I know he's done some karate films. I don't know much about him. I didn't really have time to go watch 100 movies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is he's just a very, very big action star who's an accomplished martial artist that's been in films with, as you said, Bruce Lee, but also several Jackie Chan films, as well as even like Jet Li and all them. And yeah, this film, something I kind of realized when watching the movie, and that made a lot of sense when researching this. This film is actually kind of a vehicle for him, in a sense.
I feel like kind of is putting it lightly.
Yeah, it just might be. It just might be a little light of a way to put it. But
so to establish, so first of all, this film was produced and distributed by Kurata Promotion, his company.
Yes.
That's made to promote him and market him.
Yes.
So the film is literally just his own production.
Right.
I'm trying to it's like The Room is a Tommy Wiseau kind of promotional film of him.
Yeah, yeah. And then on top of that, this film is also a celebration of the fact that this is, I believe, the 100th film he's appeared in, as
Correct.
It was marketed.
Correct. And that's why the film got its first showing at the Tokyo International Film Festival. They wanted it to reach as many people as possible. Now, I do have a bit of a rabbit hole we can go down if you want to.
Oh, sure.
So this film, so when you show a movie at the Tokyo International Film Festival, it has to come subtitled. So they had subtitles made for it, right?
Yeah.
It was meant to be shown to an international audience. It actually was 100% meant to be an international film.
Yeah.
So the film was made with global appeal in mind. And it's very interesting because this film comes out at a time where you actually have a whole wave of Japanese films primarily marketed towards being international films instead. And I say that because it actually goes all the way back to the year 2000 when a filmmaker in a movie we've covered, Ryuhei Kitamura, made Versus. And that film became a global hit because of how Ryuhei Kitamura shot a more Western-style film, but with his own style, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then following that, he continued to make films that led to him doing Godzilla Final Wars, which is also another film that is very much focused on a global appeal, right? It goes to Sydney, it goes to New Guinea, it goes to Hong It goes to Okinawa, New York, the North Pole,
Shanghai.
It goes hundreds of different places, not hundreds actually, but a ton of places. So Ryuhei Kitamura was kind of the beginning of a push to make Japanese film a more global thing. The Japanese film industry is considerably smaller. Actually, as of like 2021, it's 1/5 the size of America's movie industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's no surprise Godzilla Final. It's no, like, everybody knows this. Godzilla Final Wars bombed. But following Godzilla Final Wars bombing, a new approach was made to produce lower budget films that could be sold to international distributors and appeal to them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the leading companies behind this was actually Nikkatsu. Nikkatsu created a label called Sushi Typhoon, and they did a lot of films. To name off a couple of them, Sion Sono's Cold Fish, Tak Sakaguchi's Yakuza Weapon, and a plethora of films by Yoshihiro Nishimura and Nobuo Iguchi. Films such as Karate Robo Zamborger, Hell Driver. I'm trying to think. I'm blanking on them now that I'm like throwing out all these names. They did all these, and then they also did a couple others, such as Frankenstein Girl or Vampire Girl versus Frankenstein Girl, The Machine Girl, Tokyo Gore Police was another one. Death Kappa actually was a part of this. That was a co-production between the U.S. company Fever Dreams and Nikkatsu. And these films primarily were action horror splatter films. Right. And they all have the same kind of group of people. Takashi Miike also did one called Yakuza Apocalypse. That was towards the end of this kind of wave. And so they all were very over the top. They had a lot of gore. They had a lot of blood. There was comedic moments. There was a lot of action. And they were supposed to be more Western films. Mm-hmm. But what's funny is, as more people tried to create Japanese or American styled films, they became more and more absurdly Japanese. And so this whole wave of Japanese cinema, I think, kind of created this opinion that Japanese films are weird. I know in a review of Godzilla Final Wars, they were like, the director of this made a movie called Versus, and look at this scene. And it's like the shot where one of the characters gets a hole punched through his head and like the eyeballs are sticking out. And like it's taken out of context, but they're like, isn't this wild? Like Japan's so goofy. So this wave of films that started with Versus and I think technically ended with Yakuza Apocalypse is kind of created a stereotype for Japanese cinema that I think more so than anything was a negative impact on them.
Well, I don't know if I'd say they'd created the stereotype, but they definitely
promoted it. And yes, definitely.
Because I mean, that sort of like opinion on Japanese media already existed from like game shows like Takeshi's Castle and all them.
That's true.
Like Japanese game shows are pretty infamous.
So this film, even though it's not related to Nikkatsu or Sushi Typhoon or Fever Dreams or any of those filmmakers, really. Actually, Yoshihiro Nishimura did work on this film, but he's the only true connection between this and all the other films. This is I don't know if like a cash in on that concept, but this film very much is of that time.
Right.
This film follows those same ideas, but it blends it with a emphasis on Hong Kong martial arts films because that's what Kurata actually preferred. He didn't like action films from Japan because they were too boring. He wanted to make a more Hong Kong wirework styled film, which didn't The Princess Blade do that as well? And I think that came out around 2011 as well.
Princess Blade, that came out in like 2001.
Did it?
Yes.
I try to forget that movie. I hate it.
I see. Because that was like I want to say it was right before Against MechaGodzilla.
Yeah, it was 2001. But that's another film that used the whole Wireworks thing pretty extensively. That was just something that was... Well. Yeah. There's actually a couple moments in this film that reminded me of Final Wars, which was pretty funny.
Oh, that's funny.
But no, they
was
wanted
more
to...
reminded of Garo. Partially because Karata's in a Garo show. That's
true. But to Karata specifically, the action scenes were the most important part of the film. He wanted them to be new and fresh, but also engage with the audiences. And so from there, they kind of built up the idea that eventually led to Red Tears.
Right. Karata wanted a female action star, kind of in line with Etsuko Shihomi from the Japan Action Club. He wanted to like kind of make a new action star like her.
Which somewhere along the way that got canned. It's really funny that was where like this film started, because like that's not remotely close to what this film ended up being.
I mean, it still has the female, a female action, like, almost lead. It feels like she should be the lead.
I feel like this film struggles to find a lead.
I think my issue with the film is lacking focus.
We'll get into that as we go along here. Now, somewhere in the developmental process, they decided they wanted to do a monster. And specifically a vampire, but then seemingly they also dropped that for the most part.
Not really. It's meant to be a vampire clan, the monsters in this.
But they don't resemble vampire.
I mean, there's two... They have like fang teeth, and the one like near the end like is meant to be like a bat-like creature.
There's two, the side one and then our female character at the very end have moments. Kinda. They're very Japanese vampires. They're very Japanese vampires. Very much inspired by bakanekos, which are transforming cats. Or yeah. That is very that yokai is very, very much a secondary influence on this film.
Yeah. I don't know if I have too much else to add that I don't really want to save for later, so I'm going to ask you if you have anything else to add before we get into the film.
Well, the film was shot in 2010. So it was actually shot a year prior to when it came out or premiered, and then a year and a half later from its actual release.
Yeah, so much so that the actress couldn't remember her character's name at the premiere.
Yeah. From what I found out, it was shown in only a handful of prefectures: Fukuoka, Hiroshima, Osaka, Fuki, Ishikawa, Gifu, Aichi, Kanagawa, Tokyo, and Omori. And those were the only places it was shown. I do know that they were very appreciative of the response that it got at the Tokyo International Film Festival, but they specifically said that the audiences were laughing throughout the film. Now, I'm sure they were like, oh, that's a good thing, but I feel like as we get into this, that was probably met with more of a negative connotation. As in, this movie's so stupid, I'm laughing at it, not with it.
I mean, I felt like the film does intentionally veer into absurdist comedy, especially near the end with the action.
Yeah, like I said, it's very much in line with the Sushi Typhoon style.
Right, yeah.
And I wholeheartedly believe that's what they went for, because those films were getting picked up by Funimation, Media Blasters, and Wells Go USA, and getting distribution as soon as it was made. So, like, that stuff was successful. In fact, like, Media Blasters, through their Fever Dreams label, was co-producing some of them, like Machine Girl, Death Kappa, Tokyo Gore Police. And so, there very much was an obvious market for this stuff, more for the cult fans that would appreciate it, and not necessarily the general audiences that would laugh at it.
Right.
So I partially believe this film ended up underperforming at the end of the day, especially considering when I went to look and see, like, for this one specifically, when there's a film where there's like 3 interviews out there, the page for the movie, and then like a making of and a footage from the premiere, and that's really all you got. I usually look to see what other people have said or have found. I couldn't find another review or podcast on this film.
Right. Yeah, no, this is very much a quite obscure film, even by our standards.
So to me, that screams, this. I mean, it did get an English DVD release. Like, I'll give it that. It's not the most obscure thing ever, but it did not garnish. It did not gain much international audience appeal.
Right. I mean, films like this are aiming for a very specific niche market.
Right. I do believe it got released in Germany, in France, I think, if I remember correctly, under the title Monster Killer. But that's about it. I actually, funny enough, Monster Killer was kind of like a almost stand-in title from what I saw. They just kind of came up with it. The initial planned title for the international audiences was Sword of Doom. And they said that's how it was going to be released in the States, but that title's completely omitted from everything but the Japanese promotional material, because in the States it's literally just called Red Tears. And Monster Killers, I think that's what it got released in other territories, but Sword of Doom ended up just not getting at all what the title was, which is fine by me because Sword of Doom makes no sense in this film. Literally makes no sense.
I mean, Red Tears is also just the best sounding title.
Yeah, Monster Killer's really clunky.
And painfully generic, too.
Yeah.
As is Sword of Doom.
Speaking of generic, I think now's a perfect time to actually go ahead and start our discussion of this film, if you are ready for that.
I do believe that I am.
So, our first establishing shot is of our female side character, leading supporting character.
Protagonist ?
And she's just kind of staring. She has a voice like where she says that it's always inside her, right?
Yeah, I'm always feeling you inside of me and whatnot. Kind of alluding to the ending of the film is how I take it, even though the ending kind of forgets about it. It's fine.
Right, this establishing shot doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's kind of there to allude, but the fact that they don't allude further doesn't really help.
Right. By the time the ending happens, you've completely forgotten about this moment.
Right.
And they don't mention it.
And then as soon as this is over, we jump to a really gruesome death. Honestly, this might be the most violent film we've covered.
Damn.
I mean, can you think of any? Versus is the only other title I can think of that might match.
Versus was more violent than this.
I mean, this shows people. So the scene we see here, this guy gets shot in the heart.
Maybe I'm too desensitized to violent movies.
and then here we see this dude get like his legs and arms broken and shoved into a suitcase. I feel like this is more like realistic violence than Versus. I don't know. I think both are very.
I don't know.
Very
They're both. I don't know. This still has the very cartoonish violence of Nishimura.
That is true. Because it does have that.
Even in this opening scene, just like the way he gets kind of like packed up into a suitcase is that cartoonish Nishimura style.
Yeah. And when I learned that he actually worked on this, I wasn't really that surprised because of this, because there are those absurdist moments like where bones just pop
Even
out.
just the way the blood looks, like Nishimura has like this recipe for blood in his movies, where it's like anytime you see a blood and Nishimura worked on it, you can tell.
It's also how it sprays.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. That's usually the big telltale sign.
Honestly,
that's how I knew it was him in Love Exposure.
Honestly, one of the things that I've always wanted to do is to kind of emulate and kind of do my own spin on the whole blood squirt thing in a movie, because it is kind of novel.
It's always fun to see.
Yeah, it's definitely a welcome, like, stereotypical thing for his work.
Yeah, it's always fun. I swear we're not sadistic.
I do think it's kind of funny how he ends up getting like he's hung off of a meat hook. Yeah. And then he gets his head cut off, which I get why they show the head getting cut off, but it also falls flat by the end of the movie,
I guess.
Because the reason they cut off the head is to explain the later beheadings.
Sure.
But
yeah.
Then we learn that that's not important, actually.
Regardless, the scene catches my attention, which is good because not a lot of this movie catches my attention.
Yeah, it does a good job showing you all of this within the first 3 minutes. Like, the title sequence happens at about 2 minutes in. So we do get a nice intro here. We start off with the question of, like, what's she talking about? Oh my God, look at what's happening. Title sequence.
Right.
It's definitely a hook to make you question, what am I in store for? What am I about to experience?
Right. Yeah. And following a title card and credits, this leads us straight into the police station where our other, I guess, protagonist, Tetsuo,
I would say he's our main protagonist.
Yeah, he's probably the one we follow the most in the film. But yeah, he's talking to this one girl about her boyfriend, who was the man we just saw getting killed at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Which she pulls out a photo and it's like, this woman has something to do with the murder.
Right.
And they, like, seemingly disregard this. Like, it's really weird because she basically gives them their best piece of evidence, and then they don't jump on it like a detective would.
Right. Literally the last person to see the guy before his disappearance.
Yeah. Where she's literally like, I have a theory that she forced him to do something or whatever. Like, they literally set her up to be the villain. And the detectives, like, take the photo, they scan it, they digitize it, and then they don't do anything with it.
Right.
Like, later on, our detective does go to this exact same floral store, but I think it's to scope out remains of him, if I remember correctly. It's not actually to find the woman. And then he stumbles upon her and then falls in love and, like, just doesn't do anything else.
Right. Yeah.
He's a really stupid detective.
Yeah. He's also just not very likable as a protagonist.
Yeah.
Which
really
apparently
awkward.
Was intentional.
I feel like I know what you're talking about, but can you elaborate?
There's an interview with Sugimoto. I want to say it was the one for the Tokyo International Film Fest, where he says something roughly translated by Google, so take a grain of salt, but it says roughly, I told the actor who plays Tetsuo that he isn't really a likable character. In the past, you wouldn't call him a hero. the point is to provide a contrast with Mishima, one of the other characters in the film. That's what propels the story.
How does it Oh.
I don't know. I get the contrast with Mishima, obviously, but why not have Tetsuo be likable? I don't get the thought process behind that.
I feel like the film's trying to make him likable, but also is
like if you're not gonna make him, if you don't want him to be likable, then why do we spend so much time with him? Why do we spend a lot of time with his relationship with the love interest Sayoko?
Right, because, and they said that, I know one of the big marketing things was this film covers every genre. It's got a monster, so it's horror-based. There's action, so you get a lot of fighting. There's a romance plot, and there's a drama. Like, they wanted it to have all those elements, and they wanted the romance and the drama to be, like, the forefront of it. But the romance never really takes off. It's awkward. It's very clunky.
Yeah, it's very awkward. Yeah, and just ends up being really hard to watch, honestly.
Yeah, because you're like, specifically,
you're
there's
just
a later scene
watching it.
Yeah, there's a later scene where he's like, well, now we're on the date. What do we do? And she's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, I don't want this to be like an interview. Do you have any hobbies? And she's like, this is sounding like an interview. And he's like, oh, well, we'll just sit in silence. And she's like, okay, maybe make it an interview. It's like, what? Why?
The worst part about this as well is that dialogue is from a moment that's meant to be like like an emotionally climactic moment in the film.
It is. It literally is. It's a flashback too, to like emphasize something. Oh my god.
Oh dear.
Speaking of the romance, following the scene, we get our proper introduction to Sayoko and her mother, which we get her pulling out meat and her getting upset because Sayoko's not giving her mother fresh meat, and she like beats her, and we get a shot of like their family picture with the dad ripped out, which is another subplot that like okay, I will say this, part of me wonders if the subtitles are missing something, because I feel like the setup is that Kurata's character is supposed to be the parent. I feel like that's something that was at one point planned or thought.
Well, with Kurata, it's mentioned near the end that his family was killed by the mother.
But her mother also tells her that she's like, later on she says like, I'm sorry that you have bad blood in you. Looking at Kurata beating up Tetsuo, I don't know. Part of me was like, I wonder if that alludes to like maybe Kurata's actually the father.
That would be an interesting, an actually interesting story idea. Unfortunately, the movie doesn't really do a lot of interesting story ideas.
Right. And like the whole shot of like the ripped parent, like the parent's irrelevant. They don't establish anything else. We just know that he was a human, which is why I think it's Kurata, because he's a human, I think.
That's a good way to put it.
I don't know. I can't tell.
He's probably human.
He's human in the same regards of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and Jet Li.
Except even more extreme, because he's karate chopping people's heads off.
He's Tak Sakaguchi. I don't know. I'm trying here.
Oh boy. Speaking of
karate,
the very next scene we meet his character.
Yeah, and this kind of reminded me of Kamen Rider because, and it's no surprise, this is a low budget film. This movie has this opening sequence with Kurata fighting. Of course, he opens with the fight. Is the only time that we get handheld action footage, if I remember correctly. And it's so shaky because I mean it's in the same vein as like your running shots in old Kamen Rider shows where the camera dude's literally running for his life, holding this camera, and you see every step he makes. There's no stabilizer, there's no crane. It's just the cameraman running with this camera, and it's crazy. But I like this style. I've actually wanted to include it in my own stuff because I think it's a very personalized touch.
Right, and I think everything here is also still clear too.
Yes.
It's not like a Jason Bourne movie where there's just so many cuts that it's just an incomprehensible mess.
It does a good job at having each shot like linger and show you everything.
Right.
But that's just because it's not a Hollywood movie that feels the need to like cut every 2 seconds.
Right. They actually have confidence in their choreography.
Right. And the choreography in this film, I will say, is really good. They do a good job at making the fights look interesting. But that being said, there's no reason for him to be introduced this way. This fight does not do anything for the plot, literally.
I mean, the thing is as well, I feel like a lot of the fights in this movie just kind of end up becoming noise.
Yes, they do. This is literally...
Oh, you continue?
I was just going to say, this is literally how I felt with GXK. Like, at one point I was like, I don't even care anymore. Can we just get to something that's not fighting? Right.
And I think it gets a little worse as the film goes along, honestly, because especially the end of the movie, the last 15 minutes is pretty much entirely fights.
Oh my God. I think it's actually long. 20. I think it's the last 20.
It might be.
Because I think it's about 21 minutes of fighting, a minute of like resolution, and then like 5 minutes of credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly.
It was like at that point, like I wasn't invested in any of the characters, so I had no reason to care about any of what's going on. So it just ended up being complete noise to me. And it's also just another issue is like the fight choreography itself is good, but near the end, it does kind of go. It feels like the fights is stretched out.
Yeah. I have some opinions on that when we get there. I'm going to talk about them. Now, I do have a question. Is there really any reason? Is this guy who Kurata is fighting here, does he show back up, or am I crazy and he doesn't?
Well, yeah, that's the vampire. He fights this vampire dude later in the film.
Okay.
I want to say he fights him like twice. Because this, if I remember right, this guy's actually played by one of Kurata's students.
Gotcha. Either way, I feel like you could cut out that whole sequence, and I mean that would not only reduce your runtime by like a minute or so, but like, or put it later in the film and cut out another fight or something.
Right.
It would work so much better if Kurata just shows up like he knows what's going on, and then we see him fight the monster, the vampire. I feel like that would be way better. I feel like that would just make the pacing feel a lot better.
Right, especially since the next scene like kind of gives you just that little bit of build up to Kurata as a character.
Yes. Yeah, because
so it's like,
we go back.
Why spoil what he's like this early?
Yeah, and that's 100% true, because when we go back to the office, the investigation team of this police department, they're literally hyping him up. They're like, he has no rules. Like, he does his thing. Like, they 100% are hyping him up. And they're like talking about it. And then they get that call and they go to the actual beheading site, but like it 100% ruins all the tension. The fact that we just saw him. Part of me wonders if they move the fight up just to put a fight sequence in early on. Like if that was supposed to be later on.
It is definitely just there. So again, this story is a vehicle for action.
Wait a minute. I wonder if that fight sequence was actually later on in the film when Ozu, his like the older detective who gets killed. Part of me wonders if maybe that sequence of him fighting the vampire ended with him finding Ozu, killing Ozu, and Kurata showing up. That would make sense.
I don't know. I think it's kind of a slightly different environment, but story-wise, it could still work.
I think it could work, and it's who's to say that because the guy just disappears. Who's to say that he doesn't just disappear, show up where Ozu is, and then he shows up? I feel like, I'm starting to think that that's what happened. I don't know. That's just a theory that I just come up with, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually how it actually went down.
Maybe, but regardless, after this action sequence and after a little bit of build up to Mishima, all our detectives end up meeting up at a crime scene of a decapitated murder. Yeah,
which we get more interactions between all of our investigators here. We learn that Tetsuo can't take gruesome crime scenes like that, and then he and Kurata leave.
Yeah. They go to a flower shop where during their conversation, it kind of establishes the contrast between Kurata's character and Tetsuo, with Kurata being this more grizzled, experienced detective to the young guy Tetsuo, who's a bit more of a wimp, as the subtitles put it.
Right, and then we get a bit of a hint of the whole Kurata has a family.
Right.
Which I like how they do this, because they hype him up as the lone wolf, like they literally call him the lone wolf. And then he talks about how he has a wife. And I think they mention a daughter, I don't remember.
They mentioned it at some point. Probably the ending.
So I like the fact that they hype him up as a lone wolf, and then they throw in that curveball of, he has a wife. And then it's revealed later on that the flowers are for her grave. I think that's really smart. I think that's a good thing here. It's very obvious this film's trying to be ominous. It's trying to be a whodunit story, because honestly, for a lot of the film, you are supposed to question, is Kurata's character actually the villain here? Which at the end he kind of is, but also isn't.
I mean, honestly, it kind of led to me getting confused at certain points. Like I had to run back a handful of scenes just to make sure I was actually like understanding what was going on properly.
Right, and so the film very clearly is trying to be a mystery, a whodunit, with the whole investigation. And this film's also very much influenced by the J-horror boom. Like, I got, like, Sadako and Kayako. I mean, I feel like her name, our main character's name...
Sayoko.
Sayoko is like, okay, Sa, and then Kayako. Sayako. It's like, I feel like you could easily say that they kind of threw those together. I mean, she's... we see her first in like this white dress with black hair. It's like, okay, guys, a little on the nose. I don't know. That's just me, but it definitely feels like this film's also trying to pull from that horror, that J-horror boom, which makes sense because it is a horror film. So influence where it's going to be made. So needless to say, I do like the mystery, but I do agree with you that it's a little confusing.
I think it also just needlessly overcomplicates the story, in all honesty.
It does.
Like
for what
I think Kurata, having Kurata as the antagonist is fine. Like, I have no problem with that aspect of it. The issue is, I feel like the detective story of this, I think that's just the weakest aspect of it. It kind of just leads to the movie being unfocused.
Right.
And
well,
wasting time on things that it really shouldn't be focusing on.
Right. The thing about it, out of all of it, to be honest, is the fact that so Ozu is like Kurata's oldest partner, and it's established that Yama, one of the other investigators, is aware that Kurata has this whole like monster task force. So if Yama knows, Ozu probably knows. And Kurata specifically asks Ozu to help him. So it's like, obviously the rest of this investigation team is on Team Kurata.
Oh, yeah, and that's actually that reminds me of another issue I had with this film, was the worldview of it. Like, I wasn't entirely sure if it was like only until near the end. I wasn't entirely sure, like, okay, how well known are the vampires in this film? Is it just Kurata's character who knows? I don't think the film does a very good job at establishing its world, because I was constantly asking, how much do the characters of this world actually know? Right.
Because, I mean, later on they do establish, like, they're trying to keep the knowledge of the Bakemono secret, so much so that they killed one eyewitness.
Right.
But also the fact that they exist tells me that people probably know they exist. And presumably the whole police department knows they're real, because we end up getting a whole team that follows our investigation team, and their sole focus is to kill these things.
Right. Like, by the end, it's like relatively fine, like, this world. It's just the actual establishment of how much do our characters know is just really wonky, especially in this beginning section.
Yeah, I would say up until about 50 minutes in, it's a very complex story for what shouldn't be.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
Because it's funny, once Ozu's killed, once Yama's character is clearly outlined, Kurata's character is clearly outlined, and Tetsuo's like basically kicked out of the story, it streamlines and it makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
There's a very clear, Kurata suddenly becomes the more villain character. Our Bakemono duo is more of the tragic characters, with the mother clearly being like the evil, and Sayako being the good. It makes sense, but it takes 50 minutes of the film to have any understanding of what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
Which is not okay, especially since the film goes back and forth to our first initial investigation. And that's another issue, is the film is so locked in to the initial beheading that we were introduced to that anytime we make
really matter.
Yeah. Because they established that 3 other beheadings happened prior to. There was 3 beheadings and that missing person. You could easily like do a whole ring thing where like these cases keep piling up. Let's look into where this originated from. Instead of keep going back to what we were introduced to, actually try to seek out the source of it. This film does not, every time it takes a step forward, it goes back to where it started.
And then there's just the issue of the investigation itself is not interesting.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that, I think a lot of that comes down to it's funny because the film, while not having a big budget, looks pretty good, except for the interior investigative department scenes where they're like in a school room. Like, it looks kind of bad.
Oh yeah, because they all just straight up in a classroom in one scene.
Yeah, and it's just wonky. Also, a lot of this opening is back and forth with Sayako, Tetsuo, and Kurata, which is another issue of why that Kurata fight sequence kind of doesn't really make sense, because they're trying to have us follow these three characters when none of them are actually intertwined.
Right.
Kurata's
four, actually, because of the girl Hazuka.
Oh, that's true. That is true. Because she's supposed to end up being an important character and is just cannon fodder.
Right. But it's also like with the movie jumping around between these characters, you end up getting a couple like just completely pointless scenes. Like one with Sayako that establishes quite literally nothing.
Are you talking about the scene following where she like tells her mother to go to bed?
I don't even remember if she said anything in this scene, so probably,
Yeah, because then immediately after this, we jump to that classroom scene where they're like trying to line up, like they have these people on a whiteboard and they're trying to like link everything, even though we already were established on who's actually supposed to be like what's supposed to be going on. You know, the lady at the beginning very clearly says this should be your suspect and they should investigate her, but they don't, and they're trying to find a link to everybody else.
Right.
Also, I cannot stand, there's like this weird, every once in a while they use a lens that like has this weird dreamlike filter or something where everything's kind of blurry, and I just can't stand it. It looks awful. It's in the opening shot, it's in the sequence, it's throughout. I don't like it. I actually hate it.
Yeah. During this scene, we also get the establishment of Tetsuo being
single.
Yeah, single. With some truly incredible dialogue that didn't make me want to throw myself off a bridge.
You should give us a piece of that dialogue.
I didn't write it down because it was just so touching, you know, that I was so distracted.
I want to say it's something along the lines of like, Tetsuo, you don't have a girlfriend? And then it was like, it's none of your business. And then they just point and laugh. Yeah, like Yama moves over to Ozu and they start pointing. It's so stupid. Like, what? Why? Speaking of like awkward moments.
It's funny saying it like in a discussion, but in watching the movie, it just comes off as cringy.
It does.
Like, it's not even funny in the actual context. It's just mildly annoying.
Yeah.
Like, there's a weird like scene later on where after Sayako and Tetsuo have met for the first time, where he's talking to Yama about her, and I just got like such a vibe. It felt like listening to two incels talk about women to each other, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah,
get me out of this room.
A couple things, yeah. Speaking of cringe, as soon as we get this scene over with, we have another shot of the girlfriend of the dude who's missing, and she like rips the photos of
and
her
just starts
licking, yeah. And then we cut to
the photos of. She's ripped it off, so it's Hazuka, or Sayoko. My bad.
Yeah. I don't get it.
We get more scene, man. That's how I took it.
We get Tetsuo then going to the location of the crime. He finds Sayako, who's getting harassed by two men, probably because she was going to kill them. And then he comes up and saves her. And then they have like a really awkward discussion.
Oh, God.
And then it ends like, I guess they walk all the way home. She hands him her handkerchief. And then she goes in. And then we get a mic peek. Oh my God. That's when you know you're on low budget, is whenever you hear an actor peek their mic and they don't like cut it. Because he screams like, I don't even know what he screams. He's happy. And then he like walks away dancing like a like a cartoon character. This movie sucks.
Okay, I'm glad we agree.
I will say this.
I genuinely wasn't sure if I was being too harsh or not, but I did not enjoy this very much.
Yeah, I will say this because, I mean, we've already kind of discussed it. We get the awkward scene where he talks about how her and him hung out with Yama, and he describes her in a way that I can only relate to so there's a play out there called Brighton Beach Memoirs. It's by Neil Simon. And in it, the main character, I forget his name, he's in love with his cousin. He describes her as like this virgin masterpiece with milk or silk milk white legs that leads to the Himalayas, as he says it in the play. And that's by like a 13-year-old hormonal teenage boy, right? That was the exact same thing that we got here with this 20-something-year-old man. And it was like, ooh, I don't like how he's like doing this. It's in the context of like a 13-year-old boy, it's like, oh my God, like he's so stupid. Like, but it makes sense in the terms of like the age and what he's going through. But when you have a 20-year-old man doing that, it's more creepy than anything.
Yeah, no, I was thoroughly not enjoying this. It like scenes like this just put the romance in what is meant to be the emotional center of the film. It ends up putting it in a really bad spot where it's just grating to watch.
Yeah. Also, Tetsuo, Kurata and Ozu go off on their own for a mission. Then we jump back to the whole romance thing where they're talking about going and getting coffee, but it's actually tea.
And Tetsuo is just being a weirdo.
Yeah, the girlfriend of the dude who's disappeared stalking them. Ozu and Kurata are on a mission. Kurata finds Ozu bleeding out and he says, "Kill me." Then we jump again. We're jumping back and forth here like it's crazy. But then we get a really awkward moment where Tetsuo and Sayako are finishing up their date and they're like joking about what to do next. And she makes a sex joke and he's like, "Oh, no. I have to ask my coworker what to do next." It's like, oh my God. It's like, anybody listening, if you've never been on a date, do not watch this movie. It's not a good movie. It does not help you.
Okay, legitimately, this feels like a movie written by someone who's never been on a date. But the way the romance is written, it's like an incel fantasy.
And
I like
the
being
kiss,
real here.
There's a kiss in this scene.
Yeah.
And like, it's so there's obviously not an intimacy coordinator, but it's too obvious because she doesn't even kiss him, or he like dodges the kiss or something, because it is so bad and so awkward. Thank God she knew that and got out of the car as quickly as she could.
Right. But there's also,
that's all I can say.
on the romance as well, there's just some horror, like we've already mentioned, like the conversation between Tetsuo and Yama, and some of the dialogue near the end. But even here, there's just things that Tetsuo says where it's like, Sayako, run as far away from this man as possible.
It's like in the real world
joke. Like,
oh my God.
And then she's like,
not the stalker joke.
A woman would welcome a stalker like you. And it's like, no,
it's like, oh,
a real
God.
person would never say something like this. A real person would run away at this point.
You know, it's funny. Sayako's actress actually was in Stacy Attack of the Schoolgirl Zombies, but I'm shocked that the writer did not do that one, or it wasn't the director of Stacy, because this film is like, if you want to watch like the incel duology,
is almost harder to watch than in Stacy, and Stacy was pretty bad.
If you want a good double feature of Japanese films adapting Western monsters in a incel fantasy, Stacy Attack of the Schoolgirl Zombies and Red Tears are your two. It's weird how we had a Stacy movie this year. We didn't plan that. That wasn't the plan. But here we are.
Double feature from hell.
That's how it would be titled too. And tonight's broadcast features the double feature from hell, 2 Japanese cult classic films that adapt your typical monsters in wild, wacky Japanese fashion. First up at 7, Stacy Attack of the Schoolgirl Zombies, where
Dr.
when women die...
Approved.
No. Oh no, that's not okay.
It's not. That's why he approved it.
Followed up at 9 p.m. with the 2011 vampire film Red Tears. Don't miss this incel duology from Japan. It's going to be great. You won't want to miss it. Tonight at 7 p.m. Central.
I wish I missed it. I wish.
I dare somebody this Halloween season, watch Stacy Attack the Schoolgirl Zombies and then watch Red Tears and send us a message on how you feel after.
You will regret it.
If somebody does that,
you will regret
please let us know.
You will regret it. After this incredible review, I don't think anyone would want to.
This is almost as... honestly, this is probably as bad as the Stacy review.
I'll give it this. I was dying slightly less overall of boredom than Stacy, but I was bored through both of these.
Now, it's funny we're talking about this because clearly the girlfriend of the guy who's gone missing understood that this movie was not working because she tried to kill Sayako, and I really wish she had achieved what she set out to do.
Yeah, but she fails and is arrested by Tetsuo.
Which stirs the controversy because he's a policeman, which I get in the context of, like, they don't want to get found out. But it's also like, you're acting really suspicious. Like, any police officer, especially one in an investigative division,
who knows your link to the case,
would know that that's a red flag. This movie is written horribly. None of this would actually happen. Oh, I can't stand it. Ozu's dead after this. We find out that Kurata once again found him, his head's chopped off, which this right here, like, solidifies that he's the one cutting the heads off. But we know that she's the mother's the bad guy because she was beating on Sayako. It's like, who's the main villain here, people? What are we trying to achieve?
You know, I think that really speaks to just the big issue of this movie is that there's a lot of ideas here that are just thrown together and it just ends up becoming a complete mess because there's just too many ideas here and it just is completely unfocused through the entire runtime up until near the end where, as you said, it kind of streamlines itself a little.
Now, I will say this. One thing I do love about this movie is the director's eye for, first of all, transitions, and second of all, actual camera, like, framing and motion is really good. This film achieves and does a stellar job at great... there's some really, really good transitions from scene to scene in here, and the actual direction is really well done. And that's something I will say this film wins over, like, a film like Stacy that's very bland with all of that. This film clearly has a director behind it who has an A, understanding of editing, and B, has an eye for cool framing and shots.
Right, yeah.
There's even a couple of moments where there's a little bit of a fisheye effect. It's subtle, but it's there, and it looks really good. I mean, the color grading, which I'm not going to fault the film on, because it could be the transfer that the DVD was, pulled from. The color grading's really atrocious. This film's like really muddy.
Mm.
But I
it's
also
a
wonder,
low budget 2000s Japanese film. Like, I'm not gonna harp too much on that.
Back into the film before I get too off the rails. We jump back in. We get a interrogation of the girlfriend with Tetsuo, where he brings up that she's got her boyfriend's phone. And spoiler alert, it's Sayako the whole time. We basically learn that here, even though she said that at the beginning. Like, here we are, like, about halfway. We're a little less than halfway through the film, and they're not, like, they haven't figured it out yet. It's like, what? It doesn't make sense. It's stupid.
Yeah, but during his interrogation, he ends up getting kicked out by Kurata's character. It's also important, just as he starts to hear about the bakemono. Right.
This is where we learn that it's a monster. And then this is also where Kurata's like, you're literally in a relationship with one of our main suspects. Which he acts surprised whenever he tells her, Kurata tells Tetsuo, she's one of our suspects. And he acts surprised. It's like, well, shouldn't you have known that from the get-go?
She literally should be suspect number 1 or number 2 just based on that photo alone.
Yes. But he acts surprised, and then Kurata interrogates her a little bit more. He asks the guy who's like keeping notes of the conversations to go get them tea. And he does it. It's really okay. It's not really stupid, but it's kind of stupid. Like I feel like a person in this circumstance would be like, okay, we'll have to call somebody. I don't know.
I am willing to let that slide.
Either way, it's stupid, and Kurata ends up having her bite her tongue off.
That was meant to be a tongue? I couldn't really tell.
In the because Kurata says it was suicide, she bit her tongue, but I thought it was a jaw.
Yeah,
but then
because he smashes her head against the desk. So I don't know why the tongue would come off.
I don't know, but Tetsuo and Yama find out that she's dead. They run back in. Kurata's like, she committed suicide. But this is also where Tetsuo's like, you killed everybody. You killed her. You're the one who's like doing all of this. Which, I don't even have energy to complain anymore. Like, we're halfway through the film and you're trying to play this like moral dilemma thing or something. You're trying to like confuse the audience when the audience doesn't even know what to think now or ever. The audience very clearly, because the film has not been like sneaky whatsoever, has established the problem. Now we're just watching 3 characters bumbling around when they're supposed to be smart detectives. It's so underwhelming. It's so underwhelming. Also, we should establish that the bakemono, Sayako and her mother, said they had to leave, like right then and there earlier on. But they don't.
Yeah. Pointless scene.
They start to leave and then they don't. And then they attack another dude and we see her mother kill him.
Starting to transform.
And then she packs him up, or Sayako packs him up in the travel bag. And then we're established with the monster division, which comes out of nowhere. And then they all meet up at the house. Like, Tetsuo meets Sayako and her mother at the house, and then a little bit later they all show up at the house, but we'll get to that. But
yeah. I'll say the kill thing was fun. I thought it was... I kind of liked how weird it was that the vampire had, like, the vagina hand thing that it killed with.
Yeah. That was very on the nose too.
Yeah. Although it was funny because I honestly thought it was more like a werewolf type creature at this point than a bat. Honestly, I didn't actually, because I didn't do my research until after I'd watched the film. So I had no idea that this film was about vampires. And watching the film, I didn't really realize these were meant to be vampires.
I really, like I said, I feel like they're more in line with Bakaneko.
I mean, they don't get they still do have all like the vampire things, like they're drinking blood. They've got they're bat-like creatures.
One of them's a bat-like creature. They have the fangs. They suck blood, and one has the wings. That's it. This is the most Japanese of a Western vampire could get.
Also, another Japanese film to your vampire movies.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We do get some backstory following the introduction to the mother turning into a bakemono. We get some backstory of her with her husband, Sayako's father, and Tetsuo, and them kind of talking about love and whatnot. This whole scene's awkward.
Right, and suddenly the mother, because Tetsuo is such a nice person, that she accepts and loves Tetsuo now, I guess.
Yeah. And then we get a pretty cool fight sequence with the other random monster that has been showing up throughout this film.
Yeah, this is probably the most fun action scene in the film.
You know, it's funny because it is the most fun. It's also the most pointless. The whole subplot with the third monster is the most pointless thing in this film. It's literally there just to give Karata more fight sequences.
Yeah.
This is also where I started to question what Karata is, because it doesn't make sense. He gets stabbed in the foot, and there's no blood, and he just kind of... And then he uses the pipe to, like, kill the dude. Like, what am I watching?
He does, like, a roundhouse kick and just knocks the guy's head off. But the guy's head splits in two. So.
Yeah, this was where I really, like, felt the Sushi Typhoon influence.
I will say, this is probably one of the scenes where the comedy actually works, though. Like, it's just so absurd, but also so violent that it's just legitimately, it is kind of funny.
Yeah, I would agree. Then we go back to the house where everybody's at. Yama and his task force meet Tetsuo in, like, the living room. I will say this, it was at this moment where I kind of realized that the whole house thing is designed to be like a Showa style location, like a classic, like, Bakaneko ghost story kind of film. And I do appreciate those influences here, and I think it works out through the entirety of the sequence, especially later on, which we'll get into. Tetsuo reveals, like, a ton of, like, cut up body parts, which is cool, I guess. I don't really know. Karata shows up and starts slapping him around.
Yeah, this is also where we learn about the tragic backstory of Karata, which is just told to us in a pretty boring exposition fashion.
Yeah, eventually Karata kills Tetsuo, seemingly.
Yeah, angering the mother enough that she ends up transforming into a vampire and fighting with the task force.
Which, did you get Devilman vibes with how she transformed? Or is that just me?
No, I was getting Gara vibes this entire scene, most of this movie, because it's like, I'm like, man, this is a really bad episode of Gara. Like, it's literally just like the monster is like, oh, this is just a random horror of the week that just happens to be a bit more vampire themed. That's what this felt like.
Really?
Yeah, especially when some of the stock sounds they use for the vampire bat sounds like get used for a dragon and Zero Dragon Blood.
Well, they're also just stock dinosaur sounds.
Yeah.
It sounds awful. Though I do love the whole fight sequence between the mother Bakemono and the task force. Because it actually looks, again, this is where I really see the Showa influences, the way she's kind of running around very ghost-like, fighting all the task force with their dual blades and whatnot. I thought this sequence was probably the best in the entire film, just because of the style.
I thought it was pretty cool. The thing
she's
is,
quickly...
though, it's like I'm just in. The only reason I'm really enjoying it is because of the creature effects and the gore. Like, I'm not really enjoying the action itself because I don't care about any of what's happening at this point.
Right. Yeah, and then she dies and, like, karate chops her head off for some reason, even though she's already dead. Which then, it's seemingly like it was an accident because the blood splashes onto Sayako, which we learn that she is human until the blood of her mother gets thrown on her. Which is weird because her mother doesn't want her to have the blood, but she also says she has a destiny. Like, she wants her to become a Bakemono.
Yeah.
I found that a little jarring, but once she gets beheaded, the blood splashes onto her and she becomes a Bakemono herself. It's so lacking because she like grows fingernails and fangs, and that's her design.
And then near the end, she gets like elbow blades.
Yeah. She like gets angry and runs into the forest. This is where we get that whole flashback sequence you were talking about earlier, that it's supposed to be like really touching about how they'll like be together forever, and it's just really awkward.
Yeah.
We get another Showa-esque, I would say, fight where she's fighting the task force in the woods at night. She ends up killing Yama and the whole team. And this is the thing. So this whole sequence happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's fine, whatever. It is what it is. But instead of like having that fight happen, Karatas finds and sees the carnage. Something else happens. Climax, final battle. It literally goes from that to Karata showing up at the industrial location that the final climax is, and they just start fighting.
Right, and their fight goes on for so long too.
Right, and the problem with it being set up this way is the final fight is right after the death of her mother. So we literally get Karata fighting the side villain monster, a brief like 2-3 minute gap. Then we get Karata slapping Tetsuo. Then we get the Bakemono mother fight. Then we get Sayako fighting Task Force Team B. Then we get Karata fighting Sayako. Like, it all happens right after each other. The pacing is so off, which ends up feeling like you're watching a 30-minute fight sequence.
Right, and it doesn't help that because these are both like superhuman characters, seemingly superhuman characters, just capable of doing anything, that half a fight and that most of the fight ends up not having much dramatic tension, because up until like near the end, there's no stakes because nothing that they're doing is really harming the other that much until Karata ends up stabbing Sayako.
Right. Yeah, because she gets the shoulder blades, and then he pulls out a sword out of nowhere. And then this is where they have their sword fight, ending with her getting stabbed, which seemingly is about to end everything until Tetsuo comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and just hits him with a van.
And then he has like a broken hand and a messed up face, and then he hits him again, killing him.
He tries blocking the car.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
It's legitimately, this is pretty funny because he blocks
Yeah,
the car,
it's
and then his arm, like the bone of his arm, ends up just going through his back.
yeah. This whole that part reminded me of like a Hong Kong film, which is not a bad thing, I should say. I'm not saying that in a negative connotation. I think that's legitimately one of the funniest aspects of
It's
this
like
final
something
fight.
that happened in like Ricky, the story of, or Rikio, the story of Ricky.
Yeah. And then Tetsuo climbs out of the van, which I want to know how he even climbed into the van and drove it all this way. And then he like rolls over and dies in front of Sayako, and then she sprouts wings because she drank the Red Bull from his face. And then the credits roll for 5 minutes or something.
Yeah. This movie sucked.
Yeah. Okay, here's the thing. Red Tears is a full throttle action film. It's meant to just be action packed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's trying to not stop at all. But there's so little going on that it doesn't leave an impression and is very forgetful. This was my second time watching the movie. I could only remember the Bakemono fight in the house. That's the only thing I remember from the entire film. And following my second viewing, I think that's still going to be the only thing I remember, plus maybe the fact that it's got some good cinematography and good editing choices in the transitions. This film is supposed to be, first of all, a like monumental 100th film for this actor. It's also supposed to be this global film. It's also right in the whole zeitgeist of very over-the-top cinema. But it ends up just being probably the worst example of this. And it lacks any noteworthy standout moments. And overall, I think Red Tears is just a bland film that if we're like breaking it down into like Western monster adaptations, this is probably the worst adaptation of vampires in Japanese film.
Yeah, no, again, I genuinely did not realize this was meant to be a vampire movie until after I had watched the film. So I think that definitely says something to just how it is in adapting the vampire concept on screen.
Yeah. Wholeheartedly agree.
But yeah, no, this ended up just being a really rather like boring affair. Like it's never too offensively bad, but it's just not doing anything interesting. It's just a complete mess that, yeah, just ends up feeling like a vessel for karate and just doesn't do much interesting beyond that.
This is a film of mediocrity to a T.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what, at the end of the day, this film, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just mediocre.
Well, I would say it's bad. I wouldn't say it's awful. I would say it's bad, though.
I guess for me, the transitions and the cinematography is what keeps it from being a legitimately bad film. I won't rewatch this ever again, probably. But I've seen way worse films. And I've seen films that legitimately make me, well, I guess this film at one point did make me frustrated. But
I'll give it
I don't know.
It's not the movie we watched for episode 100.
But with that being said, I think we can go ahead. I do have one other note, but it's more for the cast and crew part. So let me ask you, Rex, do you want me to go into the cast and crew?
Sure, go ahead, now that you've mentioned it.
And then we'll do our rankings, and then we will do our sign-offs. So starting with our cast, Natsuki Kato played Sayako Mitarai, who was in Eko Azarak, Stacy Attack of the Schoolgirl Zombies, Kamen Rider Ryuki, episode finale, Battle Royale 2 Requiem, Monster X Strikes Back, Attack the G8 Summit, Burn Robocon, Kamen Rider Ryuki Special 13 Riders, Burn Robocon vs. Ganbare Robocon. Yuma Ishigaki played Tetsuo Nojima, was in Tokume Sentai Go Buster, Uchu Sentai Kyuranger, Azumi, Battle Royale 2 Requiem, Space Sheriff Gavin the movie, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai Space Sheriff Gavin, Superhero Wars Z, Shin Godzilla, Space Sheriff Next Generation, Space Squad Garam vs. Decker Ranger, Uchu Sentai Kyuranger vs. Space Squad. Yatsuki Kurata played Genjiro Nojima. He was also the producer of the film. He was in The Seventh Curse, Gogo Sentai Bokunger the movie, and Garo, the one who illuminates the darkness. Karen Yamaguchi played Sayoko's mother, was in Kamen Rider Wizard, Ultraman Blazar, True Scary Stories, and April Ghost Story. Masahiro Nagai played Akihasa Ozu, and Yoju Takashima played Tetsuya Yamamura. As for your crew, Yoshida Hikaru was the composer for the film, which, by the way, this film's music did not fit. I'm just going to say that now.
No, it wasn't very good.
It's very techno. It doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of the film, and it ends up just being noise.
It kind of just takes me out of the film whenever it plays.
Yeah. But Yoshida-san did work on Millie Hard Revenge, which was one of the director's other films, and actually the director was picked for this film due to his work on Millie Hard Revenge and Millie Bloody Battle. So those were the two films that got him this film. Eiichi Yonekawa was your screenwriter. Horiuchi Masashi was the producer. And then your effects director, Yoshihiro Nishimura, worked on Entomiya Extinction, Tokyo Gore Police, Vampire Girl vs. Frankenstein Girl, Hell Driver, ABCs of Death, Z is for Zetsumesu, Zombie TV, Meatball Machine Koduku, Ancient Girl Corpse Dogun 5, Ultrazone, Caterpillar in Love, New Ghost Story, Mimi Baruko, Ghost Mansion, Orai Onban, Meatball Machine, X-Day Hair Extensions, Ghost vs. Alien Love Plunder, Ghost vs. Aliens Rock Hunter, Iraman, The Machine Girl, Baby Girl, Millie Hard Revenge, Death Note, I'll Change the World, Love Exposure, Teki Teki 1 and 2, Samurai Princess, Robo Geisha, Nightmare Elevator, Psycho Gothic Lolita, Karate Robo Zamborger, Yakuza Weapon, Tormented 3D, Tomie Unlimited, Zombies US, Dead Sushi, Jellyfish Eyes, Nuga Ruzume Z, Giant Size Zombies, Attack on Titan the Movie Part 1 and Part 2, Z Island, ABCs of Death 2, O is for Ochisuri, and Shin Godzilla. And then finally, your co-writer and director was Takanori Tsujimoto, who worked on Ultra Zone, Ultraman X, Ultraman Rube, Ultraman Taiga, Ultraman Z, Ultraman Trigger, Ultraman Decker, Ultraman Blazar, Ultraman Arc as the main director, Izo, he worked on the making of Izo, Ultra Monster Palace, ABCs of Death, F is for Fart, Kaiju Bar Cheers, and Millie Hard Revenge and Bloody Battle. So the director of this is the main director of the most recent Ultraman show, which makes a lot of sense when you look at his style. I was not shocked when I saw how many Ultra things he had done.
Right. Well, with that, I guess now is I'm sure going to be very shocking ranking.
Yeah, we're going to start with our least favorite and go to our favorite. We have two movies. Rex, what's at your number 2?
Red Tears.
Likewise. And my number 1 is 100 Monsters. What's yours?
I have to agree. There was no other option.
There was no other option. We could not put Red Tears above 100 Monsters.
100 Monsters is actually good.
Well, with that being said, Rex, do you have any final thoughts or statements on the film?
Not that I haven't already mentioned, I don't believe.
All right. Well, I have just one last thing to say. And that is, hello. I'm Elijah, and I have a Kaiju and Tokusatsu problem. Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com, Kaiju Ramen Magazine, Kaiju United, of which I am the Chief Innovative Officer. I am also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine, also Kaiju United, of which I'm the Chief Innovative Officer for. My writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Outside of writing and podcasting, I also served as a consultant on the upcoming Titanic Creations officially licensed Yonguri articulated figure. You can go to titanicreations.com/Yonguri to order yours today. I've also had the privilege to produce bonus features for SRS Cinema. I have worked on Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo, Liverleaf, War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiren vs. Gora, and the upcoming release Sharkdemic. You can order all of these Blu-rays on srscinema.com. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and old YouTube videos, along with an ever-growing playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I eventually will get more content out soon, so definitely stay tuned for that. I'm also a creative consultant for the Season 2 of Giant Monster BS. You can listen to that show on any podcast platform you listen to under the name Giant Monster BS. I help write their intros and outros. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at ET13_productions and my X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. Now, Rex, where can people find you at?
Well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at Rexino, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram, Rex_Xeno. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't actually, that's a lie. I'm literally reading this off of a MacBook. You can rate us on Spotify. To stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, head over to www.kaijuconversation.com to find our episodes, social media, news, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually, we're going to have original artwork on there, but until then, you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. Recently, in our Discord server, there was a conversation about Kamen Rider, specifically Kamen Rider Amazons, it looks like, where they were talking about it on Amazon Prime.
Based show.
You have a lot of background noise.
I'm not surprised, that's why I muted.
It's a great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Jesus Christ. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusive to the channel, like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Krzyzewski on the channel. I definitely butchered his name, I'm so sorry. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. Week 2 of Halloween Horror Season 5, I think we're on Season 5, is done. We have 3 more this month. Hopefully they're better. So
please,
we'll see what happens. So thank you guys so much for listening. I enjoyed this, even though it was not a great movie. It was a lot of fun either way.
let this be the worst one.
Let's hope. But all I have left to say is, as always, please remember, Life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt. There's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. Kaiju. Not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now, baby.